Hello there, this is a video to explain the standardised scores that we use when we do tracking at Beacon. So this is an example of what you'll see for year 7 and 8 and 9 in the way that we give the information. So you will see partly here at the beginning the assessment percentage, and then we talk about the assessment percentage average for the year group, and then finally the standardised score. So let's take you through those three different columns. So first of all, just thinking about the assessment percentage, and this on its own, just kind of considering one student at a time, this easily tells you where they did best. So clearly this student got the highest marks in English, the lowest marks in geography and history. So in terms of how well did they perform in the test, this column is good enough. This tells you English went the best and geography and history went the worst. However, what this doesn't do is tell you about everybody else. And that might be quite important. We think that probably is quite important for you to look at. So if we look at the second column, this gives you a sense of how does it compare to everybody else. So not only was the English score very high, but also it was above average. The maths score wasn't quite as high, but actually when you look at the average for maths, you can see it's quite a lot lower. So you might be thinking, and you could be thinking maybe, the maths score is kind of similar. Geography and history, both the same kind of mark, and when you look at the average in year, again, roughly the same. So you might be thinking they're kind of those two. So this gives you some sense compared to the rest of the year group that you'd be saying English and maths are above average, geography and history are kind of below average. So the standardised scores makes it easier to do those comparisons, and the standardised score is set up so that the average standardised score for the year group is 100. Getting more than 100 means that you're above average, and less than 100 means you're below average. And the more above 100 it is, the more above average you are, and the more below 100 it is, the further away you are below the average. So when we now look at the standardised scores and we look at English, as we've already said, this person's above average because 86 is bigger than 74. But actually we can see because the standardised score is 113, this is a long way above average. There weren't all that many students getting 86 and getting marks as high as that. Whereas when we look at maths, it is still above average, so we should still be pleased with that. The standardised score is still above 100, but it's 106, it's a bit lower than 113. So when we look at the maths scores across the year group, we'd be saying actually a reasonable chunk of people got more than 67. So they're still in the above average score, that's still very good, but there were people presumably got scores into the 70s and maybe 80s. When you look at the geography score, the standardised score is 99, so this is only very slightly below average. So presumably that means for the geography scores, they're weirdly very kind of spread out. And although this student was kind of 8 marks below the average, actually that really, the marks were hugely spread out. So in geography, maybe the marks went from kind of students got somewhere between kind of 20% and 90%. So being this much below average really still places you pretty much around the middle and pretty much around the average. When you look at history, actually, for history, the student is a little bit below average. They're kind of 91, aren't they? Sort of 10 marks below average. So there's a reasonable spread of results, a reasonable number of people between the 56 and the 66. So what we're hoping with the standardised scores is it does just make it easier to do that kind of between subject comparison. And so what that should lead you as a conclusion, I think, when you look at the whole thing. So firstly, what should you celebrate the most? So I think everything you read here says that we should be really pleased here with English. Slightly more difficult then, where can you improve? Because obviously you can always improve everywhere. Very, very unlikely to get 100%. But kind of where does a bit more effort of improving make the most difference? What might be the easiest bit to improve in? And it might be when you've got the feedback from the subject. Maybe there's one thing that went wrong when didn't go so well quite often in maths. Maybe in maths being better at fractions would make quite a huge difference. Maybe in geography there was one topic that had quite a lot of marks to it, and actually improving that one topic would make quite a big difference. And then thirdly, how does it help for the future, which probably isn't something that year 7 need to think about just yet. But if you're year 9 looking at this and you're thinking, okay, what does this tell me for option kind of choices? This will tell you here that you're, because you look at the standardised scores, that the geography is better than history. So if you're trying to choose between those two, just looking at the test scores would tell you that history is the thing to go for. So I hope that's been helpful. Please do be in touch if you have any further questions. Thank you.